Welcome to Tech Data's 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Welcome everyone to 30 Minutes with a Hacker. My name is Jade Whitty with Tech Data Security Solutions Group. And I've got with me here today Brett Scott, who's with us on pretty much every call, as we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Brett is our resident ethical hacker, let's say, who is just extremely knowledgeable in cybersecurity and has kind of a very unique skill set. And we'll be touching a little bit on that today as we get into the topics of privacy and how it relates to China and Russia and what's really going on from a global perspective. To kind of get into this, I think it'd be great, Brett, if you could share a little bit about your background and how you got into cybersecurity and then came over to tech data.
I appreciate that, Jade. I am an old school hacker. The good hackers never get caught. Let's just assume that I was probably engaging in the activity that would have led to a large engagement with the U.S. government. It never did. I grew up a hacker. I love computers. My passion was in computing. I was literally asking to go to computer camps, not regular summer camps, etc. So I am fully a nerd. I fully accept that. I embrace my geekness. But it really is about passion, right? So I've been a passionate technologist, and I've been a developer, right? Writing code and making big systems, and I got to have a very successful career as a programmer. I got to do a lot of very large global projects, and as such, people kept attacking my stuff. People kept trying to break into my systems and steal the data that I was trying to protect. And as such, it just made me become better at cybersecurity because I didn't want people stealing from me. I cared that my data and the stuff I was helping to make happen wasn't stolen. So I've always had not only from my hacking perspective, but also from my work life, trying to protect stuff and protect data. And it wasn't until I had success with an IPO company that I realized that a lot of people were urgently needing the cybersecurity knowledge and skills that I had. And so I essentially hung out a shingle as a cybersecurity professional, which began my transition from coder into cybersecurity professional. I'm at Tech Data because I founded an organization called the National Cyber Warfare Foundation, and did that in 2012, 2016. The U.S. government, DHS, recognized the Cyber Warfare Foundation as leading the country, and they did a huge study, et cetera. And as such, I was speaking at a lot of conferences, and I met Alex Riles, who's our vice president here at Tech Data, and we hit it off, had a great relationship. And once I realized that in working with and through Tech Data, the largest distributor of technology in the world, this would be the perfect place for a guy like me to have significant impact within the cybersecurity community globally. And I can do it all from the same spot, better than I could do anywhere else. Tech Data is one of those organizations that is uniquely qualified and able to provide real global security solutions. So I'm home. This is my happy place.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I know probably some of our competitors may argue with us that we're the absolute largest, but suffice to say, we're definitely one of the largest for sure, and global Fortune 100 company that most people haven't even heard about because we don't sell to the general public. We work through partners, and we have an amazing thousands of partners that are in this space and that are ramping up and delivering great cybersecurity. So, Brett, I know that, and this is something that you didn't share, but I would see Department of Homeland Security. I would see other three-letter acronyms traipsing through our office at times, holding up in your office, which was when it really perked my ear that this is someone that really is tapped into what's going on out there. And I know you can't really share much about that, and a lot of that's something you can't talk about, but just I know that you have connections in and you are tapped frequently to do certain things to assist on some pretty major things that impact not only this country but other countries. And so I kind of one of the things that was intriguing when I was first talking to you, several years ago, was just understanding what's going on with China and Russia and the hacking world. And I think there's a perception that maybe Russia is the big threat. A lot of people are saying China is the big threat. I'd love for you to share your perspective on that.
Well, certainly, every single country in the world has a cyber warfare doctrine these days, and they're all vigorously pursuing it. So it's not just countries, it's organizations, terrorist groups, all kinds of entities that are looking to change or have influence in the world. They're all adopting cyber warfare as their primary method because it's inexpensive and you can force project. You can take a few individuals and have a tremendous amount of impact. But in the case of the Western world, our greatest enemy is China. They have chosen, and it's not really Chinese people, right? It's the CCP, right? The Chinese Communist Party. They have chosen to make themselves adversaries, and many dictator type entities will pick an existential enemy that they fight against. The CCP has chosen the Western world, primarily the United States, as their oh my gosh, terrible threat. What would happen to us if the United States took over? And so, because of that, it's forced. They've chosen a course that forces us into conflict. The United States has taken multiple efforts to try to diffuse this thing, but they are extremely enthusiastic about theft of our intellectual property and harm and damage to our influence throughout the world. And they treat hacking and influence operations and information warfare like we treat baseball. They find people at the earliest ages, peewees, they teach them, they train them, they have a system that grows them from a very young age all the way through their adult lives. And they're really thorough and very professional about it. They also recruit talent from all over the world. If you're a hacker and you win a competition, literally anywhere, you're going to get somebody from China and their CCP inviting you to assist that country in harming us, right? And so other countries do that. Iran does that. Russia, to a degree, does that. Not really as much. So our biggest threat is absolutely China. Not to say that other countries aren't doing things to us or are really trying. Iran's super duper trying. North Korea's trying a lot. So there are a lot of countries that are trying to do this. And unfortunately, a lot of our enemies believe that the United States is vulnerable, like we could be taken down. And that's the kind of thing that has motivated everybody. And so we're now living in a time of near total war from an information warfare standpoint and certainly from a cyber warfare standpoint.
It's fascinating. When I've heard you talk about this, and I'd love for you to kind of drill down a little bit more. The concept that they are recruiting or training people from a very early age. Maybe talk about how young they're training someone to be a hacker, and then that they have developed over the years, and who they're actually tracking through those years. The dossier that they keep, things that we've talked about. I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
Yeah, Americans especially are really bad at comprehending the threat from China. China is a country that thinks generationally. And so, as an example of that, China has many more people than we do. And so they can simply afford to dedicate human resources to stalking everyone in the United States. There are obviously higher priority targets and lower priority targets. But the fact is, China stalks everyone in the United States. And they train their kids from the time that they feel that they are cognizant and able to take in these types of lessons. So you're talking, 5, 6, 7 years of age. They are training them to become cyber and information warriors. And obviously, there are some people who take to it and others that do not. They will weed out the people that don't really take to it and track them out. But then everyone else that's in there, they will continue to grow and enrich them. And then they are the ones that are stalking us. So, the United States doesn't think about generational warfare, but they will target our children and they will stalk them through all of their life and development. And you might say, well, why do they care about what my 6-year-old is doing online? And the answer to that is they are gaining information about that individual. And even though they're just a sixth grader right now, one day they'll either be someone important or they will be connected or a pathway to someone who's important. So being able to have total knowledge of everyone from their youngest thoughts as a young child all the way through the time that they're buried, they want to know everything they possibly can about them as a means to their effective information and cyber warfare operations. So the thought that I'm going to target children that are they're just playing on a playground, and I'm going to get to know them, and I'm going to know everything about them, and then I'm going to later on 20, 30 years from now, I'm going to use that very same information to now target that same individual that I was stalking as a child, to now breach the organization that they work for or gain access to someone that they know. That kind of thought process is completely antithetical to American culture.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that ties in at all with what happened with Swalwell. Maybe you can touch on that because it sounds like that may be what happened.
Well, and so, there are technologies out there that now have the ability to, without even talking to you, brain patterns can be read, if you will, like a book. And so, in the spy business, the concept of a sparrow, where they send a very attractive something to you, whether it be male or female, so that your nature starts overriding your better judgment. They find out what you like, if you will, what are your archetypes of female or male archetypes, and then they will find someone that they have that matches that archetype, and then they will send that person to you to then extract information. And that's what happened to Congressman Solwell, who literally had a CCP spy as their relationship, their significant relationship, and as such, relationship that the spy had with Solwell allowed them to influence congressional activity, actions within the congressional district that Solwell was operating. And so, as such, it's like a Manchurian candidate situation where you're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, they've been all the way through all the stuff we're supposed to be keeping private, and they had access to influence others who had no idea what was the hand that was moving that." So, this is the kind of thing. These are some of the benefits that occur from that type of information and cyber warfare.
Yeah, it's scary. You touched on the fact that they're training these kids essentially to become hackers, and some take to it, some don't. Can you give an idea of how many we're talking about each year that are actually kind of almost graduating or they're cranking through? And then my understanding from talking to you before is that they are assigned to different kids that they're tracking, and that's their job. Is I don't know how many it is. Maybe you could share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So they also have expertise, and they find people who are adepts in a particular skill set. They will then hyper train them into that skill set, and then that's the job that they do for the country, right? And so that kind of early development, continuous tracking, and continuous involvement is something that they have perfected. Intriguingly enough, the Chinese government came through the State Department to come visit little old me and the Cyber Warfare Foundation as an official state visit. And one of the things they wanted to talk about was, how do they get people who decided in China they don't want to be a part of that system to get back into the system? So it was kind of ironic that they come over here to the United States and ask me for help on keeping their people who are harming us. I thought that was a little funny. But by the way, I think we made it into the 5th-year plan. So if you want to research that, you can actually validate I was on that visit, and they did come officially visit us because we're in the plan. But again,
Why do you think that they did ask you that? That doesn't compute to me. Maybe you can touch on that.
well, they are very much followers of a book that was written many, many, many hundreds of years ago by a guy named Sun Tzu, and that is information is the power, and they don't need to hide because they know they're the enemy. They know we're the enemy, and we recognize each other as such. And so it's not unusual for them to try to gain information wherever they possibly can. Now, when I accepted the meeting through the State Department to say, yeah, let's go meet, most of the people within the security establishment in the United States thought I was completely crazy for doing that. But again, from my standpoint, even though I know these people are intending to do me and my children and everyone else here harm, I want to know what they're up to. I want to know what they want to say to me, right? Because they're trying to message me when they're here. And then I also am in the room, so I get to message them back. So from my standpoint, better knowledge and better understanding is preferred to, oh, well, I don't talk to people who scare me, right? And so even though most people would run from a meeting like that, I embraced it, and I felt it was an opportunity for us to humanize each other a little bit, but also to communicate, like to truly communicate instead of sending messages through Twitter or whatever. We are able to talk to each other and see what's going on, and most importantly, I took a read from what they're doing. Like, what are they trying to ask me? What are they trying to suggest to me? What is it they're trying to manipulate? And so, because that's a part of everything in their culture, I wanted to see what they had in store for me.
That's fascinating. What were some of the things that they're asking you? Or are they even approaching this with you? And is the State Department in the room with you, or is it just you and them?
No, actually, the State Department was there. There were several interpreters within the room. It was a fairly large delegation, but ultimately, what it came down to was they were having trouble keeping their hackers motivated and engaged with the government and military over there, because they would just simply opt out. They'd be like, I don't want any part of this. And the real reason why they're having that problem is their hackers have better access to information. Their whole country blocks huge portions of the internet, so their people don't get savvy to what's going on. Well, guess what? Their hackers can beat that.
Right.
So they get to see the total picture. And it's a beautiful thing about humanity. Most people who know that they're working for the evil people choose not to do that. They're like, you know what? I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not doing good in the world. I'm doing evil in the world. And so many choose to opt out of that activity. And so obviously they were pretending, if not real, because I have no way of truly validating if it's a problem or not, but they were suggesting that they have a significant problem keeping their late term trainees engaged and motivated to be active in what they're doing in China. And so the National Cyber Warfare Foundation is not receiving any government funding. We're not part of the US government. And so because of that, they felt I might be the kind of hacker that might give them a perspective on how to keep their hackers engaged or motivated and so forth and so on.
Because you have knowledge of how to keep hackers engaged in your own cyber warfare range. In other words, you're going to share how do you keep people engaged on this side? Or are they coming to you saying, how do I keep my people engaged? It seems so bizarre that they're asking you for this information.
But the thing is that if you consider the reality, which is there are so few people on the planet that are actually competent in cybersecurity, you could understand why that would be a natural decision for them to make. And that is, we got to get this information. This is someone who will meet with us. We should reach out. We should talk with them and see what they can help us with.
What was some of the advice that you gave them?
Well, I started by saying, guys, you are engaged in quite a lot of hostile activity. There is a natural pattern of history that shows up that if you continue this activity, it only leads to one very dark and very unfortunate conclusion. You should try to find better ways to do this, and you should absolutely try to introduce ethics into what you do, because you're no longer the China of old. You are now a China that is in the competition for world influence. And as such, as you mature, the stronger you get, the more benevolent you must become. And if you do not, then the entire world decides to reject you all at once, and then we have a global war. So, like, you should consider your track that you're on, and maybe consider better ways to become more benevolent, not more hostile to the world. And so that was my message back to
Gotcha.
them.
Did they just nod their head like they're listening, or
You
did they
know,
seem receptive to that, or an agreement that if we could only change our government, then that would be great? Or what was their thought process?
it is pure vanity to assume that they even would consider what I asked them for half a millisecond, right? I I assume they completely sloughed it off, but I am one of those people that was ingrained with a set of ethics, and so you don't get anything in this world you don't ask for. So I asked that they consider to become more benevolent and less of a global threat, lest we all fall into a global conflict.
Gotcha.
So I did my part. I'm sure that my parents would be happy that I at least asked. Um, but ultimately, they have a difficulty with their industry working with their military, because they have just kind of a different construct for how their intelligence and military establishment tries to work with their businesses. And so, because they have created so much mistrust within their own business world, because typically China's heavy-handedness was, okay, well, we need this, take over everything, take it from them, and then we're going to run it. And when that fails, because government is not good at running businesses, then they go, okay, well, you guys take it. And of course, they hand them just this broken shambles. And so there's this pattern and history of being unsuccessful in integration, probably would be a good word, with their business operations. They either own it and control it, or it's a shambles. So
Right.
that is something they were seem to be asking something about, which is how does your organization integrate with everyone? And so, as part of what I was talking about, I talked about the fact that, well, we don't integrate with government, right? So like, even though our government is very different than your government, and it's dealt with its businesses and organizations differently than you do, we still don't work with the U.S. government because it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, the government has a mindset that is simply not compatible with people who think for themselves. So because of that, they are. I said, look, your problems are different, but still the nature is the same between what's happening in China and what's happening in the United States. The United States has not effectively worked with industry to create good solutions. And there have been a number of attempts, but almost every one of those attempts, the moment that they start becoming successful, gets chopped off at the knees and then it falls apart again. And that's just because of this natural propensity of governments to think about how solutions are delivered. It's incompatible with the way actual solutions are delivered and how business operates.
Interesting. I'd like to pivot back to the concept of privacy, talking about these kids, basically raising them up to be hackers, and they're gathering all this information. And part of that is learning the name of their dog, where they went to school, different things like that. Talk about how that's used from a privacy and from a hacking perspective.
Privacy is absolutely going to be the number one topic on everybody's lips here. If it's not already, it's going to be within the next year or two. And that's because there are so many things that are being introduced on the U.S. side as far as regulatories and laws that American business has never really had to think about or do with. And so privacy is one of those things that once you lose the information, you don't really get to recover it. And I'll give you an example. Like a lot of people think, well, biometrics is the answer, right? So my finger, it's on my end of my hand, it's mine, and that's the only way I can authenticate to something. And then, a few years ago, a German photographer took a picture of a public official who did this during a speech, and was able to
hands up to the camera, or
it just was, hey, blah blah blah, stop, or whatever he was saying, and took a picture of that with a high resolution camera and was able to recreate the fingerprints of that official. And so the thing is that if someone compromises your password, you can simply change your password. You cannot change your fingerprints. I mean, people have been tried, their stories, etc. But no, you can't change your fingerprint. You can't change your biometrics. So once that biometric information is lost, you can't ever recover. You can't do anything about it. It's just gone. You've essentially sacrificed your ability to use it if everyone complies with not using that. So again, it's the kind of thing where one loss of one thing is total loss. And so that kind of existential problem magnifies, or is the natural, grotesque example of when you lose all this information about yourself as a kid, my dog's name, my birthday, all the significant events in my life, the high school I went to, the car, my first car, all of those things that they can know about you. Once that information is lost, it becomes very easy for them to predict what your complex security password would be, or even your security passphrase, because they know everything about you. We as humans like to think of ourselves as more sophisticated than we actually are. And because of that, whereas we think we're being spooky squirrel hanging out in the closet, snickering and making up the super plans with the super secret password, the fact that everyone knows what you're thinking and everyone knows the realm of thought that you might have, whatever you come up with, it's within their domain of knowledge about you. And so therefore, it's very easy for them to figure out whatever you were trying to do in the super secret private room in your closet. So that's the problem that Americans don't really consider. And that is, every time you lose information about yourself, you're creating, it makes it so much easier for everyone else to steal your stuff or become you, right? And so the statement I just made there, probably a lot of people were like, whatever, rethink that, right? If we live in a completely digital world, which we kind of had a sample of this past year in 2020, think about the fact that if everyone's virtual, how do we know you are you, right? Now, if your ego is overriding your judgment on those, when you're saying, well, I'm me and everyone can figure out who I am. Nope. If you're in digital world, anything could be made to look like you. And if they have all the information about you, you could literally be arguing with a fake you and they might win the argument. So that's the kind of thing that we need to think about. We have been unprepared for dealing with the transition to a fully digital world. And if that's the case, how can you still be you? And that kind of threat is massive, and we have been completely behind the curve on this one. And that's where a lot of these privacy regulations are descending upon us all. And there are two sets of motivations. One is, people who don't really understand what's going on, but we got to do something, so they throw laws out there. That's one mindset. But in the case of our European friends, the concept of operating with privacy as the primary goal in operation of a business is antithetical to American business. American businesses are based on getting to know the customer, which is the antithesis of privacy. And as
Mhm.
such, if Europeans can impose a set of regulations that makes American business function with privacy as a primary perspective, then all of a sudden we're unprepared and we are weakened. So
Yep.
if you're just a fractured power that's trying to reassert itself in the world, hey, why not slow the other guy down by putting some weight on their shoulders, right? So our European allies love privacy regulations as a way to slow the United States down in its growth. Our enemies look at the privacy as a tool to use against us, and in between that, we have a bunch of lawmakers and public officials that simply don't understand what's going on. It's total chaos around them. Everything's on fire, everything's exploding, and they're just like, "Oh my gosh, I just have to do something. I got to do something." And so that's where we are. That's literally the world that we're living in right now. Is we're unprepared, we're behind the curve, and there are several people and several entities and nation states that are trying to hurt us and slow us down for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said about Europe. I know T-Mobile in the U.S. It sparked some controversy recently when they told their subscribers they could share their mass browsing, their app data, and their online activity unless they opted out. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and how that relates to other carriers and privacy.
Well, let's not beat up completely on T-Mobile. I mean, first of all, that is a really bad move. T-Mobile is originally Deutsche Telekom, so they should know more about privacy. They should be respectful of privacy more than they are. You should always have to opt in. That's absolutely the mantra of privacy. So that's not a cool move. Shame on you, Deutsche Telekom and T-Mobile for doing that. They're no longer Deutsche Telekom, but shame on you, T-Mobile, for doing that. But let's not be harsh on just them. Every single mobile phone that exists today is rooted by the carrier. And by rooted, what I mean is they have administrative, full administrative level access to everything that's on your phone. So if you have a private compartment, doesn't matter. They have full administrative access. You've got anything that you do through your phone, they can see and hear it all. So every single mobile carrier is doing that. Now, over in Europe, which has GDPR and some of these other things driving privacy now, they are publishing phones that aren't rooted by the carrier. And as such, that's the beginning of an opportunity to protect yourself from total privacy invasion through full administrative access to your computing device. And so they have over in Europe a thing called Pine Phone. It hasn't really made it to the United States because it's spotty for coverage here, but that kind of thing is absolutely what will be happening more and more. And identity and all of these other things are going to be super hot topics going forward. And American businesses and Western businesses absolutely need to understand what's going on so that they can keep up with and not get run over by this giant herd shift that's going on when it comes to how to protect your customers' information and how to embrace privacy as a concept in your business operations.
Well, thank you, Brett. I know we need to wrap this up. We're kind of at the 30-minute mark, and I just want to say thank you for your time. It's always so fun to pick your brain and get your perspective on things. I know that a big part of what drives you, and you mentioned this at the beginning, is being able to help people, and you've got the ability to do that and training and working with our partners. We have over 8,000 security partners that are focused in that space, and so you've got a really a great opportunity to be able to share empower people, and we can put our head in the sand and we can say this isn't happening, or we can get educated on what really is going on out there and try and have a fighting chance. So I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to next month's podcast where we can prick your brain a little bit more.